Hi, everybody. How's it going? I am Ruth Rumack. I am the Executive Director of Education at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. And thank you for joining me tonight. I know it is a gorgeous, beautiful, summer-like evening in the middle of May, but it's lovely to talk about outdoor things. It's perfect to talk about outdoor things. In fact, 2 weeks ago, when we were putting all of the pieces together for today's webinar, I was thinking to myself, it's cold and it's rainy and it's wet and I can't even imagine going outside to play. But here we are 2 weeks later and it's just absolutely beautiful. So I'm so glad that you're here. Let's start by just introducing ourselves a little bit. I have a feeling that it may be a very quiet webinar this evening, but that's okay because I've got lots of information to share. So put in the chat, let me know, who are you thinking about tonight? What are the ages of the kids that you're thinking of? And what school system are they part of? Are they part of a private school, public school, Toronto board, Catholic board? Give me a little understanding of who's out there, and then I can tailor some of my comments to that as well. All right, whenever you like, you can throw something in the chat. If you have a question, throw it in the chat, and I'll be checking that periodically as well. So, without further ado, let us begin. Hello there. I am Ruth Rumack, as I said before, Executive Director of Education at Ruth Rumack's Learning Space. And we are talking about summer learning, outdoor learning, how to make it fun, how to make it inclusive and encouraging curiosity, and just have a really good time. So that's me. At Ruth Rumack's Learning Space, we have a very specific pedagogy in that we really believe in active learning. We believe in multimodal, multisensory, like just getting into it, getting your hands into it, getting your body into it, and really making that brain-body connection. We serve a wide range of students of all ages and all needs, and we are working both in Toronto at our 2 locations and as well online, of course, as we have been for the last several years. So let's get into it. Summer slide. This is actually true. It's a thing. It's a real thing that has been documented and researched. And we know from several different studies that when children are not exposed to academic situations, that time frame between, let's say, June and the end of August into September, that they can lose up to 30% of their academic gains that they made through the year. They can lose in that 2 to 3 month period. So the question is, should we take the summer off? Should we give our kids a break, or should we keep the learning going? And I want to say both, because we can keep the learning going while having fun at the same time. It doesn't have to be about pushing through a particular curriculum or making sure that you're meeting some industry or, academic standard. It's really about encouraging curiosity, letting kids have fun, letting them engage in things that they wouldn't have a chance to do during the school year, and really being outside, getting some fresh air as well. So we can do both. Let's look at the next one. So we don't want to let the learning stop because, of course, as we know, as adults, learning always is happening. I mean, it's happening every single day. And for kids, even though they're not in a school situation, it's really important for them to see that there is, so much to learn from nature. There is so much to learn from following your own curiosity or your own interests. And we can really take this learning beyond the curriculum, as I said before, in a way that we cannot do during the school year. And in our Northern Hemisphere area, in our North American atmosphere, we really have this opportunity of summer and good weather, hopefully, and we can get outside. Let's take a look at the next one. So there is actually some research behind it. It's not just something that we make up or that we can see just by observation. But when we learn outdoors, there's actually a decrease in stress and anxiety. We are more physically active, which of course is always good for our both physical health and our mental health. And it allows us to have some really interesting and different hands-on experiences. We do know from research that it improves self-discipline in ADHD students. And we also gain a greater environmental awareness. So I don't want to say we're going to commune with the trees, but we do have an opportunity to understand how the environment affects us and how we affect the environment. And we can see it in a more realistic way, as opposed to reading it from a textbook. Let's look at the next one. So we've got all different places to learn when we're learning outside or when we're learning in the summer. And there are some, it's not just about being in your own backyard, but really taking that advantage of going out for a longer walk or camping or going into a ravine or, just going to your local park and seeing what's happening there. Let's take a look at the next slide. We're going to talk about each type of space, but we're also going to talk about different grade levels so that we're going to be appropriate for the students that we're thinking of. Oh, there's something in my chat. I'm going to take a moment. Kristen, Provincial Demonstration School, transitioning back to TDSB. Yes, thinking about not having my daughter return to TDSB, maybe a homeschooling learning pod or maybe a private school. Well, you know what, Kristen, we have a really awesome opportunity here tonight because we can have a little one-on-one at the end if you like, and we can chat about those things if you want, to pick my brain a little bit. But transitioning back to the TDSB, I can certainly appreciate your hesitations or your concerns, but maybe I can give you a couple of pointers and especially some things that you can be doing between now and September that will boost your daughter's confidence, boost her skills, and as well give her an experience that, as I said, is just different than being in the classroom. Okay, let's take a look. So we've got a bunch of different places that we can do our learning outside of the backyard. So in Toronto, we're really lucky because we have so many natural environments. We have ravines, we have parks, we have the lake, we have all kinds of different landforms to visit, as well as some really cool places that are sort of hidden in the city, but are still public spaces. Let's take a look at the next one. Oh, tell me also, what is the age of your child? What grade is she in so that we can tailor that as well? And anybody else who's out there, let me know what grade your child is in. So I'm going to start with the primary learning outdoors. And, primary learning, they're so excited and they're so full of energy and they're like sponges. I mean, most students are like sponges when you get them in the right environment and they're engaged and they're excited. But those primary kids, they just love to get their hands into it and be in the moment and be in the experience. So let's take a look at a few different things. Okay, so Kristen's daughter is finishing grade 7, grade 8 in September. Excellent. We can talk a little bit more about that when we get to the upper levels. So what have we got for primary? Well, lots of things to do outside. Sidewalk chalk is like your favorite. It's my favorite. It's a favorite for my family. We always have a box of sidewalk chalk by the front door. When anybody is bored, I can send them outside with the box, and it occupies them for at least a good 20 to 30 minutes without having an interruption. And for those younger levels, putting the alphabet out there, leaving some spaces if you're practicing numbers and letters, as well as just the reading outdoors. It's kind of novel to set up a reading space outside, and that becomes your go-to spot at the end of the day. Sightward scavenger hunt is another idea that we use in the office a lot, but it's great to do outdoors as well as the number. There are so many books about insects and plants and things that grow and animals and all sorts of things that you can use real life examples of, start with the book and then move outdoors, see if you can find those actual insects or animals. And then you can carry that through with either a writing project where you're writing a paragraph together, or you're drawing a picture of the item and then writing about it, etc. And then my favorite, which is really the hands-in activities where you're concocting and creating and then writing about it. So perhaps you're making a mud pie and you're writing out a list of ingredients that you might put in there. You might write about the senses and, you know, choose something that you're looking out at outdoors. Use your senses. So smell it, touch it. What is its texture? What, only if you can, taste it, or what you imagine it might taste like. And using the sight and using describing words. All of those things can be applied to a number of different activities. But if you use your senses and you write about them, talk about them first and then write about them, it's always a good launching off point, either for a story, creative story, maybe a poem, maybe write a song about the 5 senses of that particular item. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. So primary math. I love doing math outside because we can gather all the different materials that you see out there, and we can do so many different things with them, especially for the primary years when we're really talking about base 10 numbers. So looking at groups of 10, looking at 10 groups of 10, that makes 100, looking at what does 100 items actually look like. That's what the picture on the bottom is, where we've got 100 sticks, 100 rocks, and then just practicing that correspondence between the symbol of the number and an actual number of items. So I remember with my young nephew and my daughter, when they were much younger, I would take them to the park, and this is a park that was full of pine cones, and I would get them to gather up groups of 10 pine cones, and then we laid them out in a path, and then we played some games along the path of those pine cones. And then when we had all our groups of 10, so we had 10 groups of 10, then we laid them out in one long string, and we estimated how long it was going to take to get from, you know, one tree to the next. Where are 100 pine cones in one single line going to make it between the 2 trees? I mean, we just kept extending it and kept thinking of new activities to do. And it was very engaging, and it kept them busy, and it also gave them a sense of what that number actually looks like. Okay, let's look at the next one. So primary learning outdoors with patterns. Patterns is a huge part of the primary curriculum, not just in math, but in language and in other places as well. And these pictures are actually pictures of the artwork of Andy Goldsworthy. And he is a really remarkable artist. You can see that he's taken natural elements in nature, and he's created patterns with shape, with color, with texture, repeating patterns, gradient patterns, all kinds of different things. And we actually use Andy Goldsworthy in our mini masters program, which is an art program for our 3 to 5 year olds. So I was introduced to him through my research of finding new artists. And what I love about this is that he's taken both natural elements and then added extra elements to create his art. And this is something that we can do at any age, in any place, at the cottage, in the backyard, on the front, you know, your front paveway, or if you're in a condo, on a patio, gathering a whole bunch of natural items and then just playing with the colors and the patterns. And then you take a picture of it and you post it and you get some comments, and, you know, it's very validating to see what you've done in that moment. The other cool thing about this is that when I do it with our younger kids is we talk about the sort of the fleeting aspect of this kind of art, that, you know, we might set it out in one particular way, but we're not expecting it to stay that way. And this is a good lesson for all ages as well, that it doesn't have to be perfect, and it's not going to stay perfect. It's okay if the wind comes and blows some of the leaves away, or if, you know, it changes the pattern a little bit, or we can actually look at how it changes over a period of time. We could use time-lapse photography and actually take pictures every 10 minutes or every 3 minutes and see how it changes and then put those things together. So again, there's a lot of discussion, a lot of creative thought that you can put into an activity like this, but that you can extend much further than just creating that pattern. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Outdoor science. I mean, my goodness, where do you start and where do you stop? There's just so much to do. One of the things that one of our teachers does with her daughter, who's in grade 2 this year, they started it during COVID and they've continued, is bird watching. And her daughter has become extremely interested in the different kinds of birds in their neighborhood. And they were even able to find a bird watching guide who took them to, I think, either Leslie Spit Park, or I have the name of it. Hold on, I'll tell you which one. But they went to a particular park, and from there, they were able to actually learn about different types of birds and their habitats. And they went with an expert, and the expert really shared information with them that seemed to ignite this love of bird watching in her daughter. And so she became more interested in it and has now kept it up for the last 2 years. Another one that I love, everybody loves bubbles. Who doesn't love a bubble? Who doesn't love watching it grow, watching it float away, watching it pop, trying to catch them in your hand or back on the bubble blower? And there are many, many different online recipes for bubbles that you can actually turn into science experiments. So you can tabulate, I'm putting 1 drop of glycerin in this group of solution. I'm putting 3 drops of glycerin in this. Just by the way, glycerin makes your bubbles last longer, if you didn't know that. So you can use it as a science experiment and then tabulate your results and see, do the experiment, which ones last longer? How does adding glycerin or another particular item change the consistency or change the way that it looks? Same thing with growing, planting, anything, keeping lists and keeping notes of your observations and how tall something is or how wide or how long it takes to grow, or if you plant it in different places or leave it in different amounts of sunlight. Like, to me, the ideas are endless. And I like to look to the kids and their particular interests and their curiosity and ask them the questions. What should we do next? How can we, what could we do with this that would make it different or make it bigger or better? Okay, let's look at the next one. So this is another thing that I love to do in the summertime. And this is actually all ages, not just primary, but this is a map of Toronto and the GTA. And if you go to this website, mapto.ca, and we can put that particular link in the chat as well. I'm sure Joelle wouldn't mind doing that. This is a map of Toronto with all the different fruit trees in Toronto. And the fruit trees blossom and produce fruit at different times during the year. And sometimes they have more than one season. So they'll come out twice. And it's not just the trees, but it's also berries, nuts are available, and they're free because these are all on public property. And if you follow this map, you can you could even do this as part of the academic side of it, create the map, put a grid on top of the map, and then choose your path. Figure out what trees do you want to get to, what's in season at this time, when will they be ready? And then you can go from area to area and go on a fruit hunt, a fruit scavenger hunt. I have a friend who does this with his 3 kids every year. They love it. We've joined them once and we loved it. And just even being downtown, I know on my way to our Bloor and Spadina location, there are huge blackberry trees. And at certain points in August, you can actually stand on the ledges of the things that, like the gardens, the rock gardens from the apartment buildings, and you can actually pick the blackberries and delicious lunchtime snack. So that's a little gift from me to you, is you can do a little hunt outdoors and find the different trees with the different fruit. Go hungry, you'll come back full. Okay, let's look at the next one. So now let's move into junior intermediate. This would be grades 4 to 6, 4 to 7. I mean, typically it's 4 to 6, 6, 7. And we are looking at what can we do with language outdoors. So again, looking at creative writing, looking at creating a space that actually is dedicated to reading or writing or doing that kind of work, a quiet space, an interesting space. I mean, when I look at that picture of that tent, I'm just like, oh my gosh, I want to crawl up in there and just read my book all afternoon. Like today was a perfect day to have an outdoor reading tent, set it up with some pillows and some blankets. We can also look at, again, using the 5 senses and creating some writing around the 5 senses. And one of my favorite things to do, I seem to have a lot of favorites, but another thing I really enjoy doing is creating either a treasure map with my daughter or my students, where we're actually outside mapping out a particular area, and then we're writing out the clues. And those clues can be practicing different language. It could be practicing different spelling patterns. You know, sometimes we have to be sneaky about it and sneak the learning in, but anytime that your child is picking up a pen and writing out notes over the summer is good practice. I know sometimes my daughter sort of avoids it for a little while. And then when she goes to pick up that pen, she's like, oh, it's hard to hold this pen. I haven't held a pen in a long time. But we want to practice writing lists, writing clues, writing just lists of words. You can do a stream of consciousness while you're sitting in the middle of a garden. And then, of course, there's a novel study. And summer reading is a great time to let your child choose something that they are interested in. It doesn't have to be part of the curriculum. If you want and you want to be proactive, you can get a list of the novels that your child is going to be reading in the next school year. And for students with learning challenges, it is a good idea to preview that novel so that they have a chance to read it at their own pace, or perhaps they're using some assistive technology to help them with the reading. Whatever it is, to get the content of that novel before the school year starts is always a good idea. And then having a chance to leisurely chat about it and make predictions and think about what's going to happen, but also talk about character development and how the relationships in the story work as well. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Again, with junior intermediate math, I like to suggest some concrete things that show concepts that they've either previously learned or they're going to learn. So for junior intermediate, multiplication and division are a big part of the curriculum. You know, starting, it's sort of introduced around grade 3, grade 4, it's starting to become solidified, but grade 5 and 6, teachers are expecting that our students know their multiplication tables. And we see many grade 6 and 7 and 8 students who it just hasn't been solidified. It's not firm for them. And that creates a lot of anxiety for those students because the math that they're expected to do with multiplication is, you know, beyond just the simple 3 times 4. They're having to do multiple different steps in order to get the answers that they're looking for. And when they don't have their multiplication facts at their fingertips or by rote, it's really challenging to get to those multi-step questions. So multiplication we can actually do with items we find outside. We can look for groups of things. So stones, for example. A multiplication array is basically lines of a particular item that show the grouping. So when we talk about multiplication, multiplication is really repeated addition. So 3 times 4 is like saying 3 plus 3 plus 3 plus 3. So 3 4 times. Or we could say that it's 3 groups of 4. So I'm going to take my collection of stones or marbles or sticks or leaves or whatever I find outside, and I'm going to make 3 groups of 4. I'm also going to show that I can flip it around and I can make 4 groups of 3, and it still gives me the same number, 12. So using concrete materials, manipulatives, we call them, really helps a student see how multiplication works. And if we use the language like 3 groups of 4, show me 3 groups of 4, show me 2 groups of 5, and then we can manipulate those things. It often helps a student who has perhaps memory issues or is just having a challenging time committing those numbers to memory. Fractions is another great thing to do outside. We've got fractions with sticks. So if we find 3 or 4 things, item that are the same size, maybe a stick, 3 items that are the same length, and we can show, well, here's the whole, and then we break it into 2 and we have 2 halves, but they're still the same size as the whole. And then we can take another one and break it in half, and then in half again, and then in half again, the other piece, and we've got 4 pieces that are the same size as the whole. And sometimes, again, when we really show it visually and a child is active in getting their hands in there and creating those manipulatives themselves, they have a better chance of internalizing what that actually means. And that concept of fraction isn't quite as elusive as it was before. Lots of math outdoors with money. You can create a lemonade stand or have a bake sale. That's one thing that my daughter loves to do. Last year she wanted to sell her lemonade for $5 a glass. And I said, I think that's a little bit steep. She was able to scale back a little, and she was more successful in that way. And then building, could be building with cardboard, could be building with wood, nails, going for the real stuff. But all of the ideas of planning something out, measuring it, and then building it, problem solving, figuring out how to make it stronger or taller or better. All of those skills are really necessary skills that don't have to come from a textbook. They can come from actual real life problems of building, measuring, and coming up with a final product. All right, let's look at the next one. My picture of slime. Who doesn't like slime? There's some really great outdoor science experiments. I mean, again, I could fill 10 pages of pictures of outdoor experiments. Lots of things to do with insects, of course, being kind to the insects, keeping that in mind. But slime itself is its own kind of science experiment. The reason that slime becomes slimy and is sort of that in between liquid and solid is actually a chemical property. It's a chemical reaction between 2 things. So different types of slime will produce different textures and different viscosity. And again, we can use science words outside of the science classroom. The picture at the bottom on the left, where all the children are running away, is the good old Coke and Mentos geyser, where you take a Mentos mint and you drop it in a 2-liter bottle of Coke or soda, and it just again, chemical reaction shoots up. You can do things like measuring how far it goes, or how fast how long it takes to shoot up, or just for the good old fun, and then talk about that chemical reaction later. There are lots of things, again, online that you can find about that reaction. And then a project for that takes a little longer, that can involve the whole family, is the egg drop design. And you can see that on the right side, where you challenge the family to either create as a team or to create individually, or maybe in partners, a device that will hold a raw egg and safely, or well, this is what we're trying to see, what design will keep the egg intact the longest from a drop of the highest height. So sometimes, you can see the materials they've used in this picture: a sponge, tape, some paper towel rolls, some string, and then they've used a parachute to have it catch the wind and lessen the fall. This is an experiment that I've done with kids really as young as 4 or 5 years old, all the way through to high school. It's very appealing if you've got a competitive nature or a curious nature. It's really fun to see how high you can get it to drop from without breaking the egg. I would suggest having multiple boxes of eggs because the novelty, is kind of watching it crack as well. So both protecting it and watching it splatter, but lots of fun, and the whole family can get involved. You could do parents versus kids, or you could do, parent teams of siblings or cousins or friends. And it's something that can actually be done over several days. So if you're up at the cottage, or you want a project that's going to last a little longer, you can also not just create. First, you have to design your structure or your container. Then you can write a little bit about it. You can write your list of items that you're going to need. Then there is the actual gathering of the items and putting them together. And then afterwards, you want to, once you've taken all your observations, then you got to do a write-up. So, there you go. It's full scientific process. All right, let's look at the next thing. So now senior, we're talking about, grade 9, 10 and above. And we're talking about practicing language skills. So of course, continuing that reading, the summer reading for pleasure, perhaps again, reading ahead for the school year to come. Some other things is writing a play or writing a movie that you then direct and get your friends to be involved with or your family to be involved with. The picture on the left is sidewalk chalk poetry. Again, that sidewalk chalk doesn't stop giving. It's always there for us. And during the pandemic, actually, my daughter would leave notes on the sidewalk. This is like at the height of the pandemic when we couldn't really go outside. We weren't doing anything. We would leave notes for our neighbors. She even left a fill in the blank where it was, how are you today, blank. And then she left a piece of sidewalk chalk and she actually got some answers, which was very validating for her. And then she would leave some notes or, some words of encouragement. But having that opportunity to communicate with the people that walk by your house might be a nice thing. One of the things that I like to encourage my students to do is to do some planning. And at that senior level, that planning can be, planning a menu for a barbecue, let's say, or a family meal, getting all of the recipes together, perhaps creating your own recipes and then writing out the instructions for the recipes. So practicing procedural writing. First you do this, then you do that. And then, of course, I like spelling soccer. Spelling soccer is for those active kids who really need to move, but they also need to practice certain words, high frequency words. We set up at the office, we set up a soccer net and we give our students a word to spell. When they spell it correctly, they get to take a swing at the ball, or sometimes we put letters, on the wall and then they bounce the ball or they throw the ball, kick the ball to the letter that they need to spell next. So also lots of variations, again, being outside and being active, but still using your language skills. Let's look at the next one. We've got senior math. So one of the big things that you can get your, older kids, your teenagers to do is start some type of business, whether it's mowing lawns, walking dogs, good old lemonade stand, as I mentioned before, but something that keeps them active and gets them to think procedurally and in a planning entrepreneurial way. So they have to figure out how much are they going to charge for their services, if what they're charging doesn't cover their costs to provide the service, they have to figure out a way to balance the charge for their service and the cost of doing that service. Really good for interpersonal skills and practicing responsibility. So starting a business, a lot of kids will do it not just outside, but kids can do things online these days as well. And then building, actually getting your hands dirty, getting in there, building something, building a structure, building a go-kart, building something, a doghouse. It could also be something like planting. So planting a garden and taking care of that garden and knowing how many, looking at a plot. And if you have a plot of so many inches by so many inches, how much topsoil am I going to need? How much, how many seeds am I going to be able to plant in that space? All sorts of different math calculations go into planting a garden as well. And this one I love is family trip. Plan that family trip. That can involve maps. So actually looking at a map and figuring out how many kilometers, if we're driving, it's going to be, what's the best route, calculating the gas price for that trip, which is something that's on everybody's mind these days. If we know that we're going to be driving 300 kilometers, how much gas is that going to take? How much is that going to cost, etc. And then it can go beyond the mapping or the destination, but it can include looking for accommodations and, looking at finding coupons or discounts for attractions. There are all kinds of calculations that we make on a regular basis when we're planning something like that. And handing it over to our teenagers is a nice activity for them to be part of that planning and also to be practicing those skills. One last thing we have a little picture of is painting a mural. And in math, we look at a grid. If you want to take something that is small and transpose it into something that is larger, we often put a grid around it. And then we look at each section and create or recreate each section of the grid one at a time. And that's a fun and easy way to transpose something that's small into something that's large. And it's quite amazing actually what you can do when you separate that small item into smaller pieces. It's much easier and you can be much more accurate in terms of your scale on how you're reproducing it. It actually produces some incredible results, even for people who do not think that they are artistically inclined. When they follow the grid and they're just looking at one little square at a time and then putting it onto the next one, it's quite miraculous how well it turns out. All right, let's look at the next one. This makes me hungry. Learning with treats. I am not above using treats as a motivator, but it can also be used as a learning moment as well. So, you know, when you're making fruit skewers, you can talk about patterns, you can talk about numbers, you can talk about textures. When we are making smoothies, we can look at, you know, reading and researching recipes or particular ingredients and the background of that particular ingredient, all kinds of things. We can look at freezing time for popsicles. You know, if I make it 6 centimeters high, it freezes in half an hour. But if it's only 3 centimeters high, it freezes in 10 minutes. So we can do all sorts of we can really stoke curiosity even as we're preparing treats for the day. All right, let's take a look at the next one. Oh, this is us. This is about us. So summer learning is can be impromptu, and it can be you know, using the natural environment. If you do want to do a little more academic, something that is more structured and has very specific goals in mind, that's where we come in. RRLS has many summer programs that we're running over the July and August timeframe. Everything from Power Pencils, which is a printing program. We're doing our reading programs. We're doing our QWERTY, which is typing, keyboarding programs, as well as for our older students, essay writing programs for essays, as well as paragraphs, all the different aspects and process of the writing process, and math classes as well. So I will invite you, I do invite you to check out ruthrumack.com. Take a look at our upcoming summer programs. We have them running both downtown, and that's at our Bloor and Spadina location, as well as Midtown, which is Davisville and Yonge. And we also have things going on online. So let's say you are out of town, you're at the cottage, or your teen just doesn't want to put on pants for the day, send them online and we will be able to take care of it in that way as well. I am going to turn it back. We can turn off the screen for a moment. And okay, let's talk about the takeaways. Okay, takeaways, lots of ways of learning. Outdoor setting, less structured, not as much pressure. Don't put as much pressure on yourself either. You don't have to teach the curriculum. Even when a student is needing skills, is needing to boost their foundation skills, we can do it in a way that doesn't feel pressured, both for ourselves or the student. And if you do feel, as I said, that you need something that is more structured and it needs to be outside of the home and not on you as the primary giver of the information, we can gladly take care of that. I would, you know, suggest trying one literacy and one math activity a day, finding a way to sneak that in, even if it's just a 5-minute activity or a 5-minute conversation. And we want to really get those brain body pieces working together. So it's not just sitting down to do rote paper pencil work. We're actually active and creative and immersed in that moment. and it should be fun.